The Story of Paper by Ying Chang Compestine, illustrated by Yongsheng Xuan. Hope I pronounced those correctly. Long ago, before paper was invented, most people in China wrote on the ground with sticks or on their hands with slender brushes. A few wealthy people wrote on silk. At school, students wrote using pointed sticks in the dirt. But the three Kang boys, Ting, Pan, and Kuai, often found things on the ground that were more interesting than their schoolwork. "Ting and Pan, look at these big fat worms," Kuai said. "Oh, these ants are more interesting," Pan shouted. "Look at this," Ting began, but then the teacher came by. "You three over there," the teacher pointed to a place far away from the other students. "10 more math problems." "Ting and Pang, look." "Oh, Ting and Pang, look, I'm using these worms to help me count," whispered Kuai. "Oh, grasshoppers are easier to add," Ting answered. "Oh, but ants are easier to find," said Pan. "Help! My grasshoppers are jumping away. I was adding 6 plus 5. Now all I have is 4 plus 3, Ting shouted as he ran after his grasshoppers. When he returned, the rest of them had disappeared. Once again, the three boys didn't finish their work. Their teacher wrote a note to their parents on each boy's left hand, as he always did. "Be sure to hold up your hands and keep them dry," he ordered. On Ting's hand he wrote, "Playing with grasshoppers." On Pan's hand he wrote, "Playing with ants." On Kuai's hand he wrote, "Playing with worms." As the Kang boys passed the rice fields, the men working there called out, "Boys, what does the teacher say today?" Ting lowered his hand and said, "Grasshoppers?" Pan lowered his hand behind his back and said, "Ants." Kuai covered his left hand and his right hand and said, "Worms." "What does that mean?" The men looked at one another puzzled, but the Kang boys had already run away. As they passed the village well, the woman who was washing clothes called out, "Boys, what does the teacher say today?" Ting lowered his hand and said, "Grasshoppers." Pan hid his hand behind his back and said, "Ants." Kuai covered his left hand with his right hand and said, "Worms." "What does that mean?" The women looked at one another, puzzled, but the Kang boys had already run away. The three boys passed the old fruit tree in the village, where old women sewed and chatted, old men drank tea, and young children ate and played. The old woman called out, "Oh, boys, what does the teacher say today?" Ting lowered his hand and said, "Grasshoppers." Pan hid his hand behind his back and said, "Ants." Kuai covered his left hand with his right hand and said, "Worms." What does that mean?" The old woman looked at one another, puzzled, but the Kang boys had already run away. When the Kang boys got home, they were all out of breath. Ting gasped, "Why do people always want to know what the teacher said?" "Oh, because he's the smartest person in the village," Kuai answered, rubbing his left hand. "My arm is sore from holding up my hand all the way home." Mine too," Ting agreed. "I wish the teacher could write on something instead of our hands." Kuai nodded in agreement. "Well, then the whole village wouldn't have to know about it." "Well, what else can he write on?" asked Pan. "We can't afford to write on silk and cloth like rich people in the city do." "Well, Mama makes clothes for rich people," said Kuai. "She has a beautiful basket full of scraps of silk and cloth." "Well, but those tiny scraps are too small to write on," Pan interrupted. Perhaps we can make something out of those pieces, suggested Kwai.
Well, but how?
Asked Ting. Papa and Mama Kang walked into the courtyard. What's this we hear about ants, worms, and grasshoppers? Asked Mama. And where you boys playing in the ground? Were you boys playing in the ground again instead of doing your schoolwork? Papa asked. What are we going to do with you boys? Mama complained. The three boys quickly lined up in front of Mama and Papa with their heads lowered. Well, those bugs like to play with us, said Kwai. If only we could ride on something besides the ground.
Yeah, those naughty bugs keep teasing us. I tried to add them up, but they jumped away,
Ting added, standing behind Kwai. Papa and Mama looked at each other and sighed. Well, now we have to make rice cakes. We'll talk about it after dinner, said Papa.
Oh, I bet we won't have time to play again today,
Pan whispered to his brothers. Well, let's hurry and pound the rice, said Kwai. After we spread the mashed rice to dry, maybe Mama will let us play marbles. Kwai used a wooden pestle to mash and beat the rice in a wooden bucket. This is easy, he said. Mama has soaked the rice for 2 days. It's so soft and easy to mash. Papa and Mama and Pan carried 3 bamboo frames into the courtyard. Each frame held a large square of coarsely woven cloth. Can we pour the mashed rice now? Asked Kwai, after peering into the bucket. Mama said, Mash it 20 more times. I think that will be good enough. Ting and Pan each mashed the rice 10 more times. Kwai ran to get 3 big wooden bowls. Papa, Pan, Ting, and Mama set a bamboo frame on top of each bowl. They carefully poured the rice mixture onto each strainer. The water slowly drained through the fabric. The mashed rice should drain in half an hour. Then we'll strain it and make some rice cakes, said Mama. She used a flat bamboo knife to smooth the surface of the mashed rice.
Mama, can we play while the rice cakes drain?
Asked Ting. Mama looked at Papa and nodded. And he nodded. Okay, but you all have to do more schoolwork after dinner, said Mama. Ting and Pan ran to get their marbles, but Kwai stayed and stared for a long time at the smooth surface of the mashed rice. A plan formed in his head. The next day, on the way to school, Kwai told his brothers, I have an idea for how to make something to write on. Well, how? What? Asked Ting and Pan with great interest. Did you notice how smooth the surface of the rice cakes were yesterday? They were almost as smooth as the surface of silk, said Kwai.
Well, but you can't fold a rice cake. It's thick and sticky, said Ting, sounding disappointed. And I don't want to write on rice cakes. I want to eat it. Pan smacked his lips. What if we use something other than rice? Asked Kwai. He told his brothers his plan. That night, after Mama and Papa fell asleep, the 3 boys quietly went into action. Kwai dumped the big basket of Mama's small pieces of silk and other cloth into the wooden bucket. Pan poured in a big bucket of water and soaked the fabric. What about adding some bark and twigs?
Ting asked.
It will give it good flavor.
Well, why not? Kwai threw 2 handfuls of twigs and bark into the bucket. I bet some wood slivers and leaves will give this stew a delicious taste, too, exclaimed Pan, throwing in a handful of leaves and wood slivers. Ting and Pan started to giggle. Kwai quickly covered their mouths with his hand. Shh! Be quiet. You'll wake up Mama and Papa. Together they hid the bucket under some big leaves. 2 days later, when Mama and Papa were out, the 3 boys pulled out their invention. Ting, make sure you beat and mash all the fabric, said Kwai. They took turns beating and mashing the mixture into a pulp.
My hands hurt, complained Ting. I think the mash is ready for the next step.
How about if we each mash it 20 more times? If this works, the teacher will have something to write on. Then the whole village will never know what the teacher said about us. Kwai said with a big laugh. When Mama and Papa came home, they were surprised to see all of the bamboo rice cake strainers, the dinner table, and the rest of the furniture, and even the walls of the courtyard covered with thin sheets of something that looked like cloth, but wasn't. Mama cried, "What happened here?" The three boys were standing in line in front of a wall. Kwai was writing on a thin sheet pressed against the wall. Ting was using Kwai's back as a table, writing on another thin sheet. And Pan was writing on yet another thin sheet on Ting's back. After the boys explained their invention to Papa and Mama, the Kang family decided to present these thin sheets to the teacher. The next day at school, the teacher wrote his first note to Mama and Papa using one of the sheets. He wrote, "I'm going to present the boy's invention to the Emperor." The teacher carefully folded the sheet and handed it to Kwai.
Today nobody will know what the teacher wrote except us,"
said Ting. "But I want everybody to know about our invention," said Kwai as he slowly unfolded the teacher's note.
Me too,
agreed Ting and Pan. The three boys took turns carrying the teacher's note above their heads as they slowly walked through the village with big smiles on their faces. One by one, all the villagers, young and old, followed the boys. The villagers looked at the teacher's note. They talked about how wonderful it was to have an invention from their village to present to the emperor. They talked about how smart the Kang boys were. The emperor thought the boys' invention was a great idea and named the thin sheets Z, paper. As for the Kang family, they opened the world's first paper factory. The Kang boys seldom got into trouble at school because they no longer had to do their work on the ground. They now had more time to play with grasshoppers, ants, and worms at home. And this is homemade garden paper. You can pause it if you want to take a look at that. Good night. I love you.